very much. Our next guest is one of America's best reporters and most stylish writers. His books include The Candy-Colored Tangerine Flake Streamlined Baby, The Right Stuff, and now his first novel, right here, entitled The Bonfire of the Vanities. Please welcome a truly exceptional writer and one snappy dresser, Tom Wolfe. Tom? Hi, Tom. Good to see you. Fine, how have you been? Please have a seat. You really do always... Well, at least every time I've seen you, you look just terrific.
Thank you very much.
Is there a philosophy behind it? It's usually a cream-colored suit, isn't it?
Well, it actually used to be a lot more fun than it is now.
Mm-hmm.
When I first came to New York, let's see, it was just about 25 years ago. It was in the spring. I went to a little tailor shop to get a white suit for the summertime, which didn't seem all that unusual to me, but I picked out a very hot material, silk tweed.
Silk tweed?
Silk tweed is, it looks nice and white and fresh, but
yeah.
You put it on, it's very heavyweight. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't wear it in the summer in New York, so I started wearing it in the late fall. And I found out this annoyed people tremendously. Now, why I enjoyed that, I don't know. We have to get Dr. Freud's Nightline and see. I can't explain that, but
yeah.
It became fun. And for about, I'd say for about 10 years it was fun.
Mm-hmm.
But then something happened. Men began to just sort of let it all go. When I saw Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman wearing only body paint on the Dick Cavett show, I knew there was no longer any chance of trying to...
but you've maintained it. You've persevered.
I was almost put out of business again by the movie Saturday Night Fever.
Right, right. People thought you were trying to be John Travolta.
John Travolta, and then after that, every shopping mall in America, you'd see the gold chains and the chest hair set coming out of these boutiques wearing it with their white suits. But you know, they didn't realize that these suits last about 7 or 8 hours. So I had to,
But you've endured.
I have endured.
Yeah, trends have come and trends have gone, but you're still here in your cream-colored suit. Speaking of trends, and we'll get to this book in just a second here. Speaking of trends, is there a new social trend? Are there several new trends? Has anything changed, really? Is there something we ought to be aware of that maybe we don't?
I do see, now that you brought it up, something that's happening in the 80s. You know, people think the 80s has been a quiet, humdrum time. I don't at all. I think it's been extremely wild. But there's an entire new vice in the 1980s. The new vice in America in the 1970s was pornography. I mean, it got to the point that in a town of about... a small city, about 200,000, there'd be 14 movie theaters, of which one, as of a couple of years ago, one would be showing Back to the Future. One would be showing Amadeus, let's say. Nobody would go to see it, but it was being shown because it won all these Academy Awards. One would be showing The Vein Strippers or some other teenage hemorrhage picture. And 11 would be showing so-called X-rated or adult films, and including places with screens that would be 7, 8, 9 stories high, outdoor drive-ins, the better to beam all of these glistening nodes and moistened folds and stiffened giblets to a panting American countryside. But that was the 70s.
There was a proliferation of that then.
That was the new vice of, but in the 80s, the new vice is what I think of as plutography. Now, pornography is, strictly speaking, the graphic depiction of the acts of prostitutes. Plutography is the graphic depiction of the acts of the rich. And you can see that in my business, journalism. The magazines that were so hot in the age of pornography, the one-hand magazines like Penthouse or Playboy or things of that sort.
Tom, you're using phrases that I don't fully understand. Maybe if you could simplify it for the layman, so to speak.
These are technical journalistic terms, but these magazines have begun to fail financially. This grim slide has begun. And what is taking their place are the plutographic magazines, such as House and Garden, Architectural Digest, or Connoisseur, Town and Country.
And these show wealthy people enjoying their lives? Is that
just the graphic depiction of the acts of the rich. I mean, supposedly, they're telling you about design or about the provenance of antiques or the history of art. In fact, they're stimulating you with pictures of how the rich live. And you'll notice that these magazines not only get thicker in number of pages, but the pages themselves get thicker and creamier and creamier and velvetier, and more velvety. And it's gotten to the point that they are such high quality that you can now see the thumbprints of the gardeners on the akuba leaves out in front of these houses in Beverly. I don't, you know, I don't read those magazines
But
anymore.
why is it? I mean,
eat them.
Well, why is that? Are there more people with that kind of dough now, and they like to see how other people with money are living, or is it does it represent a fantasy to the average American, or what is the reason for that?
I think that in the 60s and 70s, it was very bad form for people to flaunt their wealth. They wanted it. I mean, you know, the human creature doesn't change all that much. They wanted it. It was very bad form to show it. In the 80s, it has become perfectly okay to show what you've got.
But what shifted to make that attitude rise?
Well, I think there's, well, a new creature has arisen in my estimation. A new, well, if I can borrow Sinclair Lewis's phrase, a new babbitt.
A new babbitt.
Yeah, Sinclair Lewis's babbitt, and he put the phrase babbitt into the language, was a real estate salesman in Cincinnati, about 50 years old, kind of sleek and fat like a beaver, a guy who had a Pontiac.
I bought a house from a beaver once, come to think of it.
I think we all have at one time or another, and he bought his Pontiac with it. And a guy, though, he has a car like a Pontiac or a Buick, and he thinks if life really breaks terrifically over the next horizon, you may get a Cadillac.
Right, exactly. That's pretty much the way I grew up. I mean, you started with a Chevy, maybe work your way up to a Buick, Oldsmobile, and so on.
Right, and you want to belong to the right church, which in Babbitt's case was the Presbyterian Church.
Sure.
Your wife belongs to the Ladies' Auxiliary. She belongs to the Bridge Club. That has all changed in my... from what I've seen. The new Babbitt, far from being 50 years old, is about 27, 28, 29. Wouldn't drive a Cadillac if you gave it to him, because he has to have a Mercedes, a BMW, or if he's really strapped, you know, just on the way up, an Audi 5000. I mean, even if it runs over his children, you know, it's just chaos everywhere.
Just to have it there.
But because you have to have only a German luxury automobile creates the proper steely crunch as you go up the crushed white pebble driveway of your weekend house, your
But
summer
what
house.
percentage of the population does this represent?
Well, I think in real terms only about 45%. But
well, that's that's a
but
huge
everybody,
amount.
but everybody, I think everybody wants it.
Yeah. Let me ask you about Chuck Yeager. You can't turn on television now without seeing Chuck selling batteries.
That's true.
And you developed a close relationship with this man, I'm guessing, from The Right Stuff. What is your feeling about him when you were working with him and now that he's out selling batteries?
Well, you know, Chuck Yeager is one of the few thoroughly, I shouldn't say this, you're a thoroughly genuine person, but Chuck is one of the few thoroughly genuine
Well, it would be me and Chuck, and that would be it.
Yeah, that's it. It is true, though. When I first met him, he was in the last part of his career. He was in charge of the Air Safety Command in San Bernardino, California, and he told me, and he with great sincerity, that he said everything that I have ever gotten in my life has been because of this blue suit, and he touched his Air Force officer's uniform, and he was very critical of the astronauts. Well, not so much of them, but of NASA for allowing the astronauts to take money from Life magazine. In his estimation...
That was just the beginning, too, by the way, wasn't it?
That was his phrase. He said this was the first bite out of the apple. That was his phrase. As if by doing so they had been... they wouldn't be thrown out of the Garden of Eden.
So now how do you think he reconciles that change in philosophy for
now
himself?
he makes an absolute fortune.
Sure.
But so one time I happened to ask him, I said, Chuck, now you're making all of this money. What are you going to do with it? He said, and in all sincerity, he says, you know, I don't know. I think I'll give it to my children, which I understand he has done through a trust fund. Because he said, you know, when I retired from the Air Force... But
still a genuine guy, this man, do you think?
He said, before I retired from the Air Force, right after he said I retired from the Air Force, he said, I built my dream house, which was a marvelous cabin, a glorified cabin, but in the foothills of the Sierras. He loves to hunt and fish. And he says, tell me, he says, what do you do after you've built your dream house?
Well, that's true.
And I thought it was something that has always stuck in my mind. And I don't really think the money makes all that much difference.
Yeah, probably not. Now, this book, by the way, I'm just about finished with this book. I got like 40 more pages. And it's a wonderful book. But I want to point out something. If you're an author and you're writing a book and you're looking to come on this show, there's no guarantee I'll read your book, okay? but I did read this one, and I found it, as all of your stuff, very enjoyable. And good to see you again.
Well, thank you.
Thanks,
Tom.
David.
I appreciate it.
We got to... Why the Depression? Paul, you know, here's the question, the first question I'm going to ask our next guest when he comes out here. As soon as he's going to say, I'm going to say, what will the 90s be like?
Okay, great.
That's going to be my first question.
And if anybody should know...
Well, he should know,
this man
sure.
should
I'm going to
know.
ask right down.
What will the 90s be like?
I guess I should have done this earlier.
Yeah.
That'll be my first question. Our next guest's books include The Right Stuff and his most recent book, right here, The Bonfire of the Vanities. It's also been made into a major motion picture. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the program, Tom Wolfe. Tom. Tom, what will the 90s be like?
It's funny, I never guessed that you would ask that, that question. And it's a spellbinder. I think it's a hangover is the shortest way, is the short answer.
Now people question you about that because you have a way of, in one phrase or one sentence, characterizing decades, I guess, right?
That's true. You see, usually, I mean, at the outset, I was smart about this. In the 1970s, I waited till 1976. And then I characterized the 1970s, and I got away with it. I called it the me decade.
Me decade was the 70s. But you waited till it was half over before you felt safe enough to do that.
But now you appeal to my vanity, see, and I can't resist, unfortunately. And I do think it's going to be like a big cold shower. It's going
a big cold shower.
A big cold shower. Yes.
It's the decade of the cold shower, Paul.
And so if you can find a way to invest in cold showers, you're in good, you're in good shape.
Go.
But it's hard to do. No, but the 80s, I always thought of as a period of money fever. I mean, there was just money in the air.
That seemed to be what everybody was interested in. Well, but that's not true. Throughout time, people have wanted money.
But not to this extent. When I was working on the Bonfire of the Vanities, and I went up to the Bronx to get a picture of kind of the lower end of the social scale. The first night I was up there, I saw these. This is just the way people look at things. It's not the way, you know.
But you have someone to help you get home, don't you?
No, I got into silver coat.
Yeah, I know.
The first thing I saw there were groups of boys who were, 13, 14, 15 years old, who were wearing necklaces, and hanging from these necklaces were silvery rings, and inside these silvery rings were upside-down Ys, and I thought these were peace symbols. And I thought, this is great.
Yes.
In this deprived neighborhood, these boys are so concerned about the future of the planet and the threat of nuclear destruction that they're wearing these peace symbols. And I looked a little closer, and these turned out to be Mercedes-Benz hood ornaments. and it turned out that they knew exactly what a Mercedes-Benz was. They knew what those little letters are, the S, the E, the L.
Oh, sure, the model types.
They knew what they cost, and they knew that every hotshot in New York who could drove one because they saw the drug dealers driving them. So the money fever was there, too.
Well, let me ask you about, and this is the kind of question you probably get so tired of responding to, but for my own information here, my own interest, when you were a young man, at some point in your life, you displayed a knack for putting words on paper, and you thought, well, maybe I'll be a journalist, maybe I'll be a novelist, maybe I'll be a writer of some kind. I mean, this must have happened in some form or another to you. Early on?
Actually, it was quite early. My father was a scientist, actually, but he was editing a farm magazine at that time. It was called The Southern Planter. And in my mind, he was a writer. So I said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a writer. But I think the first thing you find out if you head in that direction is that you have a kind of musical facility. You can put words together in a musical way. I've never met a single writer who started off with something to say. This is a big problem.
Yeah.
They start off with a certain talent.
Is it possible for you to sit down, just empty pages, not having any idea what's going to happen, and 6 months later there's a full book there?
Not for me. Yeah. I believe in reporting. Well, Emerson said everybody has a great autobiography to write. but he didn't say they had two. So I think you sort of have to get out of the.
Yeah. So what you do is you take a topic and you chronicle it and you bring it to life.
Even when I'm writing fiction, I'll go out and do reporting. Yeah. You know, I did go to the Bronx, and it's a great, fascinating place. I went down to Wall Street.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you one other thing. Is there a book that you tried to get published that nobody would take?
No. I never had that luxury, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I always found that if you'd go to a publisher first, find out what's on their minds.
Oh, so you just kind of go in there for hire. I'm here. You need anything written? I'll take it off your hands for it. We have to do a commercial, and then we'll be right back here with Tom Wolfe. The Bonfire of the Vanities has, of course, Tom Hanks and Bruce Willis. Yeah, Tom plays Sherman McCoy,
the main character.
Who is Bruce in this?
He becomes, the character in the book was Peter Fallow, who was a British newspaper
The writer,
reporter.
the newspaper
The
writer.
writer.
Yeah, okay.
He becomes an American newspaper reporter in the movie, apparently.
Now, you sold the rights of this thing off for huge sums of money, I'm guessing. Big dough. Was this your biggest film sale to date?
Yes.
Yeah, I would think so.
By a long way.
Good for you. Now, did you do the screenplay?
No, I didn't.
Have you read the screenplay?
I haven't. I had a chance to read the screenplay, and I haven't.
Now, why didn't they let you? Why didn't they ask you to write the screenplay?
I made it pretty clear at the beginning. I really didn't want to work. I didn't want to work on it.
Is
I
that
really
the safe thing to do, or the best thing to do for an author?
No, a lot of writers love to do it, but I would hate to rework something I've already done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that makes sense because to you, that's it. There's the work. It's completed.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to really influence a movie, you have to become the writer, go into it heart and soul. And
have you seen any of the film that they show?
I have not, and I feel with the right stuff and with another movie that was made from something of mine called The Last American Hero, I had the feeling like I really didn't want to look over their shoulders. I wanted to wait until the movie is out, see it once, and if I didn't like it, I'd rather not dislike it in stages.
Yeah.
But there's a worse thing. But people are always saying, "Aren't you afraid they're going to ruin your book?" A worse thing can happen, and that is if the movie is better.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I don't know. I have a feeling about this one. I don't know. I think it would take a great deal of effort on their part to make it better than this book. You know, I don't think that's going to happen.
Thank you.
So it'll be interesting to see what does happen. But if you were to show up there on the set, it would be like, oh, hide the scripts. Here he comes.
Well, you know, I wouldn't want anybody looking over my shoulder.
No, I understand. Yeah. If you had to predict, would you get the sense that this is going to be a really good movie or just a so-so film?
Well, there's a lot of excitement about it, and Brian De Palma is a he's a good director.
So you would say thumbs up?
I would say so far. I hope it's thumbs up for all the way around.
Yeah. Do you make more money if the thing's successful?
No.
Yeah.
But do you think I care about that?
Yeah. Well, it's always a pleasure to have you with us on the program. And your new book is in the works now, I would guess?
Yes, I'm working on another novel, which will be partly about real estate developers, partly about the art world.
Try and work me in
a little bit about Asians in America.
What are we doing? We have to do one last commercial, and then we'll return, kids. Our next guest is the best-selling author of such works as The Right Stuff, Read It, The Bonfire of the Vanities, Read It, and this is his long-awaited and highly praised new novel entitled A Man in Full, Have Not Read It. It's right here. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tom Wolfe. Welcome back to the show. Congratulations on the publication of the book here.
You're very kind.
I want to tell you something. If I was going to write a book, and I think people who are writing books, I think this ought to be about the size you should shoot for.
Well,
I'm telling you, this feels and looks like, well, gosh darn it, here's a book, for heaven's sake.
Well, I had never reached 3 pounds before.
It's a 3-pound book?
I was 2 pounds and 9 ounces the last last book.
Is there
Just
ever
a push?
How long did it take you to write this book?
I'm a little ashamed to tell you, but all told, 11 years.
11 years.
11 years.
11 years. So that's every morning you get up and you sit at the typewriter, the word processor, and you write for 11 years?
Well, actually, it was a little worse than that because I would walk from my bedroom about 25 feet to my study and go to my typewriter, which I've never been able quite to make the transition to the electrified instruments. And my children's friends would come in the house and say, "What's that sound?" They had never. This is a generation. This generation Y has never heard has never heard the sound of a typewriter. It really makes you feel old.
What kind of typewriter are you using?
I have I'm not sure you want to get this detail, but a 1966 Underwood typewriter. Thank you.
A lot of the good folks from Underwood here tonight.
Yeah, you'll find lots of Underwood.
But the thing must be falling apart. How do you get it repaired?
This is, I will admit, is a terrible problem. You have to go to some place that will cannibalize another old Underwood,
right,
and give you parts. And there are about 3 people left in New York who can do it. One of them is only 82 now. So I'm counting on him for the rest of the...
Wow. Have you tried working on a word processor?
I tried. Yes, I did. My wife was good enough to give me, in 1986, a K-Pro computer.
K-Pro?
K-Pro.
Oh, very nice.
I tried for 2 months to get the hang of it, but I would write and there would be about 16 A's and 4 N's. It really drove me a little crazy. I went back to my daughter took over the K-Pro. And one day she came and said, "Dad, I hate to tell you this, but this computer is hopelessly obsolete." Not only that, K-Pro was out of business.
They're selling disco records of the 70s now.
8-track.
Well, that's fascinating. And when you... And forgive me for asking just another dumb question here, but something I've wondered about for a long time, and maybe, in fact, asked it of you the last time I saw you. When an author wants to work on a piece of fiction, is it possible for that person to sit down with complete no foresight, no planning, no knowledge of a story at all, with a blank sheet of paper and begin? Or do you have to have all of everything put in place and then you begin?
I'm a journalist at heart, and I always do a lot of reporting before I write fiction. And it ends up being about the same amount of reporting I do for nonfiction. And I love the experience because I end up in worlds that I have never known about and which I find a lot more fascinating than mine, to tell you the truth.
And when you have done this, and when one of your books is, like, you're dealing with architecture, you're dealing with art, and here this is banking, high finance, and so forth, you often end up offending people, don't you, sometimes? It's unavoidable, don't you think? Unavoidable?
Well, it does happen, but I find that most people actually kind of like to be written about, as long as you don't mention their names. But you mentioned banking, and that was one of those subjects which I had always thought was dull. Banking was just a dull subject. But one of the main figures in this book is a real estate developer. And real estate developers and bankruptcy sort of go hand in hand.
Right.
And I never realized that there's another rather martial, rather intense side of banking called the workout department. Once the big developer, let's say, has borrowed literally hundreds of millions of dollars.
A guy like Donald Trump comes in and the bank loans him.
Well, he has gone through workouts too. The bank, the loan has gone bad, and the bank now turns loose its workout people, who are like the Marines of the banking industry. I never knew these people even existed until I started poking around. And suddenly things are a lot different for the borrower. who is now known as a debtor, a term that's not used until the loan has gone bad.
Right. Prior to that, he's just what? He's a
client.
Sure. Yeah.
And the loan department in many banks is called the sales department, our marketing. Mm-hmm. And a big loan is a big sale, and right. it's a big feather in your cap.
So the guy has to default, or the loan has gone sour in somehow, and then what do they do to him?
All right. So instead of, when he takes the loan out, usually they're dying to loan him money. They take him into a conference room where there's a beautiful walnut table with fruitwood banding around it. There's little pinhole spotlights in the ceiling that hit paintings that are bound to be right. valuable because they are so baffling.
The mood is carefully controlled.
Yes, and it's now when the workout begins, things are a little different. They take him to a bare room in which, instead of having fabulous paintings on the wall, there are a pair of enormous no smoking signs. This is a breakfast meeting, and usually the breakfast consists of a cold slab of cheese Danish that puts absolute terror into the heart of any man who's ever read an article about free radicals. And they have as the ornament in the room is a dying ficus plant that's just kind of keeling over. It has kind of yellow tongues.
What is the objective? What are they trying to do to the guy? Because the money is gone. So what do they hope to gain from him under these circumstances?
They want to break. And I'm not kidding. They want to humiliate him, break him down, just the way you would at boot camp. Uh-huh. To turn him into somebody who's dedicated solely to getting money back to the bank. One of the workout artists that I met always wore suspenders, black suspenders with white skull and crossbones on them. And at a crucial part of the meeting, he'd take his jacket off just to show them. And finally, after about 3 hours of this, often the CEO of the corporation, the entrepreneur, is now practically in tears. And he'll start saying, look, all you're talking to me about is the bottom line, dollars and cents, tables and graphs. That is not what is at stake here. My wife, myself, we put our blood, sweat, our tears into this corporation. Our employees have done the same thing. This is about pain. It's about suffering. It's about the human cost. At this point, the workout artist will say, please, don't talk to me about pain, about suffering, about the human cost. I was in the war. I lost 4 fingers, at which point he holds up what looks like the stub of a hand with no fingers. Then he raises the middle digit into the sky. And this is usually, at this point, usually the sweat that has started under the arms of the debtor is now spread across the rib cage. And these two pools have connected under the sternum. And at this point, the bankers say, I'm not kidding, saddlebags, because it looks as these patterns of sweat look like a horse with saddlebags. Anyway, it's a great world out there.
So the idea is that now he will be motivated to make good on
now,
this.
He'll be dedicated solely to.
Is that particular scenario contained in the book?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. With relish. With relish.
It's ladies and gentlemen, it's a 3-pound book. A Man in Full, Tom Wolfe. Good to see you again, Tom.
Thank you very much.